Alrighty, hello everyone, hello, welcome to the Sincerely Verolina channel. I am sverolina. The S stands for several things. You may call me Sincerely, you may call me Sovereign. S is fine too. You are now listening to the Things I Never Said poetry series. On this channel, I discuss personal development, relationship dynamics, and in this particular series, my testimony as a foster child turned emancipated minor. So, if any of those topics interest or relate to you, then feel free to take a virtual seat in the comment section and engage with the video. During this podcast style episode, I am going to discuss a poem that I wrote titled Etiquette Classes. This poem is in my collection titled Things I Never Said. So if you would like to read along with me or add the collection to your bookshelf, then click the link in the description below. Bueno, let us begin. Actually, you know what? Let me say this before I begin, because if you have been following along with these parts, you may have noticed that there was a break in between this episode and the last one. That is because of a few things. And of course, right when I sit down to do this, that's when people want to start making noise. Like, why? And it seems like this is like a content creator curse, because I've watched plenty of videos over the years where other people say this happens to them too, where it's like people want to make noise as soon as you start creating your content and doing your art. Like the entire time when you're sitting there brainstorming or doing other things, everybody's quiet. But the moment you want to get started, that's when the obstacles arise. It's so frustrating. But whatever, I'm going to push past it, because at this point I realize that like if I keep stopping every time there's an obstacle, I'm not going to get anywhere and I'm not going to get this done, and it's irritating and it's weighing on me a little bit, if you can't tell. But yeah, I have been dealing with a lot of personal things, a lot of issues. Like, I'm not going to even get into it because that's not the point of this video. And it's nobody's problem, right? It's mine to fix or to resolve. So it's whatever. But there's just been a lot of obstacles. One of those obstacles actually has been my laptop. For some odd reason, my speakers, I don't know what happened. I was going to say my speakers just malfunctioned, but I really don't know. One day I used my laptop. The next day I went to use my laptop and the speakers just sound so bad to the point where I cannot listen or play. I can't listen to anything or play anything on my laptop because the speakers sound like really muffled and staticky, and I'm not really sure what happened. My laptop is kind of old actually, because I purchased it with my own money for about $1,200 when I was like 16 or something like that. But yes, without headphones, I cannot even edit my audio because the audio sounds like this, like that's not a good example, but it's like really muffled, and then there's a lot of static, like so I can't hear anything clearly, and that was a major inconvenience along with other things that I've been dealing with. So yeah, I had to do something about that. So yes, that is what I'm working with. And at this time, obviously, I don't have the ability to fix that issue, but I'm going to roll with it as I always do in my life when the obstacles arise. So yes, that is the reason for the delay, but I'm just going to work with what I have and try my best to do better and stay on track. With that being said, I will pull up the poem Etiquette Classes because I don't want this one to take too long. I know I always say that, but whatever. Okay. Oh yeah, and this poem is on page 18, by the way, if you're going to be reading along with me. If not, that's fine. You can just listen to me, but I'm going to begin, all right? Vamos a comenzar. This poem is called Etiquette Classes. On the first day of the program, they say that I am fortunate to have this opportunity, so I believe them. They say young girls must grow into young ladies, and with their help, I'll do the same. The basics begin the next time we meet. First, my posture is plucked at until it's a portrait of poise. They say young ladies sit upright with their legs tight. So from then on, I practice this. During the next class, I learn to walk with my spine straight, my head high, and my shoulders steady. They say to envision a line in front of me whenever I take a step. So from then on, I practice this. I plant one foot in front of the other, first the heel, then the toe, but my knees begin buckling every single time. That is when they tell me that I'm too afraid. I say that I'm merely losing my balance. They say, there's no need to be afraid of the fall if I know how to catch myself. So, from then on, I remember this. At the next class, they elaborate on the dangers of doubting oneself. They say as young girls, we might do that habitually, but young girls must grow into young ladies. And a lady is powerful until she chooses not to believe that. A lady is not afraid to have faith in herself. They say, a lady will love herself the way she does her loved ones, unconditionally and unapologetically. Etiquette Classes. Alrighty, thank you for listening to my reading of Etiquette Classes. So I have a few guided questions just to help me organize my thoughts. And I did have a few points that I wanted to make towards the end of my breakdown or overview of this poem. So first off, I want to start by discussing what I remember about the etiquette classes. For those of you who don't know and who have not been following along with the other parts in my poetry collection, Things I Never Said, I originally grew up in a foster home. I was obviously with my birth parents at first, and then I was placed in the foster home that I spent about 7.5 years in. And I was about 4 months, going on 5 months young, when I was placed into that family's custody. So, I don't remember very much from the first 4 years of my life. Therefore, I believe that when I was introduced to these etiquette lessons, I was probably around the age of 5 or 6 years young. What I do remember is that it was around the time of my kindergarten graduation. I was selected or chosen or asked to lead the class in a song that we performed at the graduation ceremony. So I believe that leading up to that point, I was introduced to these etiquette classes or just taken somewhere to learn how to conduct myself in formal social gatherings. So just to give you an idea of this timeline, I was probably 5 or 6. I was probably in kindergarten, like I said, or maybe 4 or 5 years young, preschool, going to kindergarten, around that time. Unfortunately, I'm not in contact with anyone from my foster home, and I don't have any pictures or any mementos. I was not allowed to bring any of those with me when I was taken from that home, so I really don't know. I can only go off of memory, which is what I did when I wrote this poem. So yes, I was really young. I was taken to this place a few times where they taught me how to eat, with the different spoons and forks and the different plates, for different courses of your meals. I was taught by somebody how to walk. That is why I kind of walk differently. I walk with one foot in front of the other, and it's not a conscientious thing that I'm doing. It's a subconscious thing. It's a habitual thing because I learned the behavior at such a young age, and I guess it just stuck with me. It's actually something that I have been made fun of for here and there, not as much as other things about myself, but I remember my father, when we were all at the grocery store and we were leaving, my dad was like, oh, look at Esta, look at how Esta walk. My dad was he started to mimic me. And at the time, honestly, I didn't think it was really funny because I didn't get along with any of my biological siblings nor my biological parents. So I really felt targeted in that moment. But since then, I of course have realized that it was a harmless joke. But yeah, everyone else that was with us got a good laugh out of watching me walk quote unquote a model. Another time, I think this was actually in 2018, I was walking with a group of girls, and there were like, I think, two or three girls behind me and the girl that I was beside. And one of the girls was like, oh my God, she walks different. She walks different. And she was really loud about it. So I just turned around, like, who is she talking about? And I asked her, who? Like, who walks different? She's like, you walk like you're a model. You walk like a model. You walk like this. And she showed me what I look like walking from behind or whatever. And I was like, oh, interesting. I didn't realize that it was that noticeable because, again, for me, it's just a habit. Like it's a subconscious behavior. Um, but yes, I do remember being taught that because I mean, otherwise I'd walk like everybody else. Most people don't walk with one foot in front of the other. We kind of place our feet like side by side. I don't know how to describe it. I just know how to demonstrate the difference. But yeah, so obviously somebody taught me how to do that along with other things like, to sit with my legs crossed and stuff like that. Just like basic etiquette, if you're familiar with what they teach. I do remember um, that my foster mother was not there for those classes. That's why I'm like, I don't know, like if she enrolled me in some type of school or something like that. I just remember someone would take us there, and we would, by we, I mean me and some of the other kids in the house that I grew up in. And then someone would pick us up. Usually my foster mother would pick us up. I think by that point she was done with her work shift for the day. And like I said, this was like a brief thing. I don't remember this being for a long time at all. Um, and unfortunately, I just don't remember very much about it. But yes, just moving on from that, I just wanted to like set the stage of like what I learned. Now, in terms of how the behaviors that I learned went on to affect me later on, that's a whole different story. I think that like when you grow up in Southern America, not South America as in the continent, but the Southern United States, etiquette is expected. Southern hospitality is a real thing. The whole yes ma'am, yes sir, no sir, like how you doing, good day, like all that kind of stuff is expected of you, and it's really ingrained in you when you're young. I was taken from a foster home in southern United States and then brought to the Midwest, where the culture is very different. They don't, and no offense to the Midwesterners, but like they don't really value like etiquette in the Midwest. In fact, when I first came to the Midwest, I was told oftentimes like, oh, don't talk like that. We don't talk like that. Like, don't call me ma'am. Don't call me sir. Like, no, don't call me that. I'm not a ma'am. Don't call me ma'am. And it's like, it was amazing and astonishing to me at the same time that it was so offensive to people to be called yes, or to be told like yes sir, or like no ma'am, excuse me ma'am, do you have this and that? Like they would be like, oh, no, I'm not a ma'am, don't call me a ma'am. And it's like, it's not a term, it's not an offensive term. It's, if anything, it's a term of endearment. Like it's a respect thing. But like I said, that's not the culture in the Midwest at all, at least like amongst the majority of Midwesterners. Maybe if you're talking to some people who are from the South, like more recently, or people who just don't mind, then yeah, they may not say anything to you. But I was taught very early on when I first came out here, like to stop all of that, and I actually did stop all of that, and I kind of regret it because I think manners are really attractive, and I think manners will take you very far in life. Having good manners is one of the things that they emphasize in these etiquette classes, of course. So I wasn't really mad at that, but I recognized very early that I had to kind of like switch it up and not speak like that to people, like except for like, much, much, much older people who I don't think would take offense because they grew up in a time where that kind of terminology was valued. But yes, the behavior of sitting with my legs straight, walking with my head high, and eating with my elbows off the table. Those kinds of behaviors stayed with me. Now, for the whole eating thing, honestly, it kind of messed me up for a little bit because I became a bit self-conscious when it came time to eat in front of other people. And it's because I worried about whether I was doing it right. And by that, I just mean that like I used to worry whenever I would sit down at a restaurant, like a casual diner, or even something more fancy, or even just at somebody's house. Whenever my elbows hit the table, I used to like quickly take them off and like look around and wonder if anybody else noticed it, because it was ingrained into me that that was a sign of like disrespect and that's rude. But of course, like I said, in the Midwest, people don't care about stuff like that. People literally do stuff like that. Like, look around if you live in the Midwest of the United States. People put their elbows on the table at fancy restaurants and at casual restaurants all the time. Even in their own home, they eat like that. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, because I really don't think your elbows are that big of a deal. Like, I don't think it matters that much. But again, as a child, when you're taught things, oftentimes you don't know how to discern from what is right or wrong or appropriate unless you have really good intuition. Um, so I just kind of like took other people's word for it when they told me to do certain things or to not do certain things, otherwise it'd be considered rude. And there is a danger in that. You have to teach your kids not to like blindly just trust anybody, everybody. But yes, as a kid, I didn't think I could decide whether the elbows thing was a big deal or not. So it just was an important thing that I felt the need um, to model, and to like a standard to hold myself to. And looking back on it, it's annoying, because like I don't know how many times I went out or ate with people and felt so awkward, and it's like no one cared, no one even noticed my elbows, no one cared about that, but I was so insecure about it, because at a young age it was ingrained into me that this is the proper way, and no one told me that this is more important for formal gatherings. You don't need to be at the kitchen counter worrying about your elbows touching the counter, or worrying about your elbows touching the table when you're sitting down amongst your friends or your family, you know? Another thing, of course, is I speak pretty articulately, naturally. I was an avid reader as a child. I loved to write and I loved to read as a kid. And I still do love to write. I still do speak pretty well for someone whose parents hardly spoke English. But when I first came to the Midwest, oftentimes I was made fun of by kids for being like too white, for talking, quote unquote, talking like a white girl, and quote unquote wanting to be a white girl. And that's been like a reoccurring thing, like pretty much all throughout my upbringing, like being called a cracker, being called like an Oreo, or even being called like a yellow Oreo. It was so crazy. This is a little like tangent I'm going on, I know. But what's so crazy is like there was this girl in my middle school who was considered an Oreo and called an Oreo by a lot of the Black American kids. And even that girl, the quote unquote Oreo, told me that I was a yellow Oreo because I wasn't even like Black enough to be considered a real Oreo like her. And again, it was more than likely just a joke in her eyes, but I was bothered by stuff like that because, well, one, I'm not Black American. So like, since my culture is not Black American, and my ethnicity is not like African American, I didn't understand why so many kids would, specifically so many Black kids, would emphasize to me and make a point to say, you're not Black, you're not Black. Like, I know, I never said that I was, but it was like, I was like held to a standard that I wasn't trying to meet. Like, I wasn't trying to prove that I was Black. And I got made fun of for all the ways in which I was not Black. And then to have like the Black kids who are not considered Black enough tell you you're not even Black enough, it was like a double insult, or at least meant to be. And it was just a confusing thing for me as well, because as a brown skinned girl with foreign parents, I'm aware that like brown skinned people like exist all over the world. We are the indigenous people from all over the world. If you paid attention in your history class, or if you took any interest in history, you would know that all around the world, wherever the European colonizers and conquistadores went, they found indigenous people to those lands, and those indigenous people were brown people. Now, oftentimes we're shown the like tan people with the straight black hair, and we're taught that those are the Native Americans. But if you actually do more history or do more research on your history, then you will see and you will read that the indigenous people, especially like in what we know today as Latin America, they were brown just like me. They were darker than me. They were different shades of brown. They had different types of hair. There's literally like different types of hair textures. Like there's drawings of brown skin indigenous people in the Caribbean with kinky hair and curly hair that's loose, and some curls are tighter. And so it's weird that the idea in the United States of an indigenous person is like basically a white person with a tan and like dark hair, because maybe those were the indigenous people of like Central America, but those are not the indigenous people of South America or the Caribbean, because the Caribbean people were the indigenous people of South America, and they migrated to what we know today as the Greater and Lesser Antilles. Like, just a little history lesson for you, because when you understand stuff like that, it's hard to just digest the ignorance that comes your way. And I started researching this stuff when I was in the 6th grade, because I finally gained access to the computer lab, and I could like avoid being bullied by just going to the computer lab and doing research for fun, for like 30 minutes or 40 minutes or however long the class period was. So I've been researching this stuff out of interest to know my people and know my history. And so I understood as a young age, at a young age, that everybody who is brown skin is not African American, everybody, or African to begin with. But that is not understood, it seems like, amongst people in the United States. And a lot of the brown skinned children who are Black American, clearly didn't understand that because of the things that they would say to me. Like, oh, if you're Caribbean, if you're truly this, if you're truly that, then how come you don't speak this? How come you don't look like this? How come you don't look like all the other Mexicans? It's like, well, I'm not Mexican. Like, what? But, ignorance, I could go into a whole thing about that. I'm going to stop right there because this will turn into a whole other tangent. But yes, just to summarize those thoughts, I was bombarded with a lot of ignorant comments due to how well-mannered and well-spoken I was. And one thing I will say about that before I move on is that there is something really irresponsible and dangerous about little Black American children being taught and then going to school and teaching other kids that every good behavior is equivalent to whiteness and every bad behavior is equivalent to Blackness. You all need to stop that. Black American parents need to stop teaching their kids that and reinforcing this notion that, like, oh, if you speak proper English, you want to be white. If you value your education, you want to be white. If you pay attention and succeed in school, you're a wannabe white person. Why is that why? Why is that the thought process? And why does that make sense to people? Because you're literally insulting yourself by saying that what makes a person Black is if they speak like they're illiterate. You're essentially saying that that due to me being articulate, I'm trying to be white, as if only white people speak English well. I could not understand that. And I resented the fact that, like, this was just a normal thing for me to be called a cracker, for me to be called, like, I'm not white. Like, obviously I'm not a cracker, like, quote unquote cracker. Like, I'm not white. Why would you reinforce that? And then, truth be told, it's like, if you wonder why there are so many brown skinned people who will gladly hang out with the white people or do business with white people and live amongst white people and blah, 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 procreate with white people. Well, if you keep telling them that everything, quote unquote, good about them is whiteness, they're going to go attract whiteness. They're going to go look for whiteness. They're going to gravitate towards whiteness because you're telling them that everything bad is equivalent to Blackness. You're setting yourself up for your own people to dislike you and to dislike themselves. So I just want to say, like, that needs to stop. That whole, like, oh, look at her trying to be white. No, that is unacceptable. And I will even say this, not too many years ago, I had this, or I didn't have him. He came up to me, and he was like, okay, I was trying not to tell the whole story, but I'll just tell the whole story really quickly. I was with a white woman who was my boss, and she was temporarily my guardian before I became an emancipated minor. He saw me get out of the car with her, and this man was a darker skinned Black American person who we had given like free food to and stuff like that in the past. So he came over to where we were going to set up and stuff like that, and he came up to me. He was like, "Oh, that's your mom?" And I said, "Yeah," because I just didn't feel like explaining my whole like freaking story to a stranger. You know, it gets kind of tiring sometimes when you can't answer any basic question like where are you from, or like you know, I'm not going to go into it, but yes, basic questions oftentimes led to me explaining myself to people. And I just kind of got tired of that. By age 16, I realized I don't have to explain that I was a foster child. Like when I get into an Uber driver's car and they're like, oh, like, so are you from around here? I just started to say, yeah, because I just didn't feel like explaining myself to people because it's invasive a little bit. And then I think that I can't help but turn the conversation to a heavy one just because, like, if I answer the question honestly, how do I avoid talking about being a foster child? How do I avoid talking about being a displaced youth, an emancipated minor, and blah, blah, blah? Like, if I honestly tell you how I made it all the way over here, if I'm from all the way over there, we're going to be sitting here for a while. And I just got tired of that. I didn't want that. So I said, yeah, that's my mom. And he said, oh, I knew it. I knew that you weren't Black. And I was like, oh, really? What makes a person Black? And he said, the way they act. That's why you're not Black. And I'm like, oh, really? It's the way that they act. It's not like who they come from. It's not the color of their skin. Because literally, that is what race is about. Race is about what you look like. So like you're classified based on what you look like. You're not classified based on how you act. So I just thought that was interesting. And he was like, well, yeah, it's the way you act. That's why you're not Black, because you don't act like you're Black. And I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. You know, like I've heard it all my life. So I just moved on. But like that's an example of what I'm talking about. To say that like you're Black based on the way that you act, I understand what he may have been trying to say is that there is such a thing as the Black race, and then there's such a thing as Black culture. That is why like when you're foreign or you are of a different ethnic background, people can learn very quickly that you're not Black even though you're brown. It's because when you don't know their culture, you don't know the culture, or you haven't seen this movie, or you don't know this song, and you don't know this band, and you're not familiar with this history or this prominent historical event, they realize, oh, there's a disconnect between us because you come from a different ethnicity. So that was something that, or I think that is what he was trying to say, but he just said it very plainly that I don't act Black enough. And I'm like, okay, I don't really know what that means. And at this point, I don't care because it's not my job as a first generation Caribbean person to strip myself of my Caribbean identity in order to make Black American people or white American people feel more comfortable identifying me. Maybe people in the United States of America should learn at an earlier age that the rest of us do exist. I literally had a boy tell me, like in fourth or fifth grade, that there was no way that I was Caribbean because he had never heard of the countries that I mentioned when he asked me, well, where are your parents from? Where are you from? Why you talk like that? Blah, blah, blah. And I have, girls that would say to me, like freshman year of high school, I remember, even though actually as early as middle school, like in sixth grade, girls would be like, oh, you see her over there with the Mexicans. Look at her, she's trying to be Mexican. She want to be Mexican so bad. Look at her speaking Spanish with the Mexicans. She want to be Mexican. She want to be Spanish so bad. They would be like, if you Spanish, then how come you don't look like that? How come your hair is like that? And so what happens is I think young people feel, young brown skinned people who are foreign and have immigrant or even first generation parents almost feel like they have to like pick and choose and then kind of conceal their ethnicity and their ethnic pride in order to not be made fun of and not stand out for all the ways in which you are different. And it's like, no, if you all are able to say, I'm white and I'm proud, and people can say I'm black and I'm proud, and Asians can say they're Asian and they're proud, Middle Eastern people, Arab people can say they're Arab and they're proud, why is it that when it comes to the brown people from Latin America in the Caribbean, when we want to just say our ethnicity, because where we come from, we identify on the basis of ethnicity. We do not identify as race, because you are not more or less Jamaican or more or less Dominican or more or less Trinidadian based on your phenotype. But in the United States of America, you are considered more or less American or a different type of American based on your racial makeup. That is why white Americans just say, I'm American. But then the rest of us, we have to say, oh, I'm Caribbean American. Oh, I'm Hispanic American. I'm Asian American. We like, there's like a classification system that tells you kind of like how American you are. There's a culture that exists here, and it's a very hard thing to navigate when you are young, and you, especially when you have like those fresh off the boat foreign parents who don't have a concept of that, because they expect you to be as ethnic as they are. They expect you to have all that pride, but then they also expect you to be able to assimilate into American society and do well. And it's hard. You can't really win, truth be told. I think you have to finally get to a point where you realize it's not your job to try to fit into other people's mold just because they're not used to a brown skinned person who speaks another language other than English. Like, they're not used to that. Oh well, that's not your fault, that's not your problem. But that is kind of one of those things I have had lots of thoughts about, as you can tell, for my entire upbringing, because when you are a brown skinned girl and you are well spoken, you are well mannered, your behavior is equated to whiteness, and it's just due to people not realizing, like, foreign parents raise you often to be very proper, even when they are foul mouthed people. Especially Caribbeans are very, very proper people. They believe in, wearing dress pants all the time. Like, they want you to dress like you're always on the way to church, like, so we can't go around our parents and be like, hey, what's up? Like, I don't know where you can do that. But like with Caribbean parents, no. No, 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 girl. Like, no, don't do that, because you will raise their blood pressure mimicking that kind of behavior. Like, they will literally ask you, like, where did you learn that? We didn't teach you that. So I was not at all like, um, I was not at all expected to be bad mannered or ill mannered once I was given to my parents, or, transferred to their custody. But I will move on, because I know that that was a long tangent. I just had to say that because somebody had to say it. Um, Now, another thing that I wanted to mention is, what did the poem, I wrote down the question, what did writing the poem help me to understand about myself, life, or the world? And I actually put that at the bottom of the poem, the line where I say, a lady will love herself the way she does her loved ones, unconditionally and unapologetically. I learned that, I would say, by the time I was like in high school, that the best way to love yourself, the best way to carry yourself is unapologetically. Don't apologize for being the good things that you are. You might want to clean up the things that need work. And it's understandable to be a little bit apologetic about that. Like, if you have a bad attitude and you know that, I think you deserve to be a little bit apologetic about that, because nobody likes a bad attitude. But if you're strongly opinionated, for example, I'm a strongly opinionated person. I know that. I don't apologize for that. I was made that way, okay? Like, that's just how I am. I'm analytical, I'm critical, I'm strongly opinionated, I'm loyal, I'm this and I'm that. And I recognize that I don't have to apologize for that. I just have to make sure that I put myself around people who are compatible with me, so then they don't make me feel like that's a problem, or I don't internalize their behavior to mean that I am a problem. And it's the same thing with the word unconditionally. Love yourself unconditionally the same way that you will love other people unconditionally. We will tolerate so much from other people and then hold ourselves to these ridiculously high standards that we don't even expect the people that we expend so much energy on to meet. And that is ridiculous, and that is unfair to yourself. I learned these lessons that I put in this poem, Etiquette Classes, along the way. And so with this poem, I kind of did something that is called like an extended an extended metaphor. I think it's actually called a poetic device called allegory, I believe is what you call it or how you say it. But yes, it's not one that I'm like very, very well versed in because I don't remember being taught it very well. However, I believe allegory is essentially what you do with a poem, where you have symbolism and events or even like statements in the poem that are actually meant to tell like a deeper story. So just really quickly, because I know that this one is already long, what I realized in writing this poem, and by the time I was like a teenager in high school, is that the world is your classroom and your life experiences are the lessons that you learn. Again, the world is the classroom. So, with coming from that frame of mind, I wrote this poem. As a way to say like okay, I'm looking at the poem right now, so I'm going to use this as an example because I feel like if you're not looking at the poem and you're not a poet, this may not make very much sense. So just use this as an example. The first line is, on the first day of the program, they say that I'm fortunate to have this opportunity, so I believe them. That is metaphorical for life. When you are the child and you're learning and seeking guidance from adults, adults often approach you and have the attitude that you should be grateful to have like your mom and your dad. You should be grateful to have this and that. You should be grateful to have every opportunity that they throw at you. And just because you're a child with no information and guidance or a frame of reference, you believe them. So when I say on the first day of the program, I'm not literally just talking about etiquette classes. I'm talking about in the very beginning of your upbringing as a child, whether you're in etiquette classes or not, you go through that initial period where you're just glad to be here. You're just glad to learn. You're just excited. And then through these life lessons, aka etiquette classes, you're molded and filled with different skills or information that you are then supposed to take and practice or apply to yourself. And so when I say, oh, in the next class, they did this, they taught me this, so I practiced this, I'm not just talking about etiquette classes. It's an extended metaphor for how in life you go through these different experiences that shape you and mold you, and you learn along the way, which is why in the middle of the poem I say that when they tell me that I'm too afraid because I take a step forward and my knees begin to buckle, they say that I'm too afraid, the poem says, and I say that I'm merely losing my balance. That's because by that point in your life, usually when you're, in your adolescent years, you're starting to understand yourself and your behavior a little bit better. But of course, when you try things on your own, your knees begin buckling every single time. Like I said in the poem, your knees give out because you haven't yet built up your strength yet. Just like in etiquette classes, when you're learning to take to take one step in front of the other, it's kind of like the same metaphor in life. When you start off doing anything that poses as a challenge to you, you're scared and you're a bit weak at first. And the adults or the mentors or the life lesson around you is responding to you that, oh, you're not ready yet. You internalize people's words or your quote unquote failure to mean that you're not ready yet. But that's not true. It's not that you're not ready yet. You're inexperienced. You need more practice. You need to have faith in yourself. You need to trust your process. And so by the time I was in high school, by the time I was 16, I was able to articulate these things. I would write about this idea or a notion of trusting oneself, being able to have faith in oneself. And so I learned this, and I have said this to my friends. I've had to write this down plenty of times and remind people that there is no need to be afraid of the fall if I know how to catch myself. That is what I've had to remind myself on so many occasions. What I realized and kind of said to myself was, for example, I would imagine if you are roller skating, one of the reasons people are afraid to roller skate is because they don't want to fall. They don't want to be embarrassed. And what I said to myself and what I would say to other people is exactly that. It's okay if you fall, because when you fall, what do? You get back up. You know how to get back up. So all you have to do is just get back up. Of course, it sounds simple, and in some occasions, things are not that simple, but it still remains fact that when you fall, you have to get back up. Even if it's gonna take you a minute, even if it's hard, you still have to get back up. And guess what? If you learn how to walk, then you know how to fall. If you know how to fall, you know how to walk, you know how to stand. So just remind yourself of that when things get difficult, or when you feel afraid of something, or when you become convinced that you're incapable of taking that next step. Understand you don't have to be afraid if you crumble, if you quote unquote fail for a moment, because you also know how to rise up again. If you know how to fail, you know how to succeed. If you know how to fall, you know how to stand. When I started to think about things like that, I realized that it really is mind over matter in a lot of tough situations, you know? But again, I will just leave that there. I don't want to go on a tangent about that. So yes, I put that line in the poem because that was one of the biggest takeaways that I had, not in my etiquette classes from when I was a little girl, but in the etiquette classes that I was still going through in life, quote unquote, around etiquette classes. The Again, based on the mindset that the world is my classroom, that I'm always learning, and that all these life experiences that I overcome or come with a lesson that I should apply to myself, you know. So I'm writing this poem essentially and going through this poem as a speaker as if I'm going through life lessons or life classes throughout my upbringing, even though I know that this is supposed to be um, a poem, even though I know that on the surface, this is supposed to be a poem about me as a little girl in foster care. I just connected to something much deeper because that's just my brain, okay? But yes, so the point of the poem is pretty much stated at the very end when I say the line about not being afraid to fall, the line about how as a young girl you doubt yourself habitually, but the difference between yourself as a young girl and yourself as a young lady, which we do ultimately grow into, is that a young lady has a better sense of self. You have a better understanding of your capabilities, although you are still learning and growing. But that is literally what I realized and what I searched up a long time ago, before the topics of like gender and stuff were really like prominent the way that and controversial. I remember I searched up the definition of a girl, and it said that a girl in the dictionary said that a girl is a premature female human specimen. It was very simple. And then it said that a boy is a premature male human being or human specimen. And then I searched up what is a woman, and it said a woman is a mature female human being. And I searched up what is a man, and it said a man is a mature male human specimen. So what I learned from just doing a quick Google search when I was like, I don't know, 14, 13, 14 in biology class is that the only difference between a girl and a woman is maturity. The only difference between a boy and a man is maturity. That is how a 40-year-old man can remind you of a 12-year-old boy. He is older in terms of, his age. He is quote unquote an adult. However, he still has the mindset of a little boy because he is what? Immature. That is what separates us in our youth versus our adulthood. It's the maturity that we have, or even that you don't have, you know? So I also wrote that last part with that definition in mind, that really you are a young girl. And I don't mean this quite literally, like I don't want people to take this the wrong way, but you are a young girl until you mature and become a young lady who has a better sense of herself. Now again, I don't mean like I don't mean that as a biological definition, because literally you are a mature female human being by the time that you become 25, when your prefrontal cortex, or what I think it's called, like your prefrontal lobe or cortex, is done developing, you know. So I threw that in there as well, because I came to understand that in my quote unquote life classes, that you as a young girl will feel like you are still kind of like stuck in that immature phase of doubting yourself, questioning yourself, looking to other people for validation and approval, and so on and so forth, until you learn to trust yourself, until you practice what it means to trust yourself, to make a decision and really believe that you know what's best for yourself, or what would be better for you given your circumstances at the time. A lady, as I say in my poem, is not afraid to have faith in herself. A lady also loves herself the way she does her loved ones, which is unconditionally and unapologetically. Apply that same forgiving love and everlasting patience that you have with some people who don't even deserve it to yourself. And you will, as you pour that love into yourself, you will start to see yourself mature. And that is how some of us can be younger than some of the adults in the room, but come off more mature. I think it's a matter of where you are on the journey of yourself, you know. But that's just my tidbit. That's just my perspective. That's the perspective of 17-year young me. And then, oh yeah, lastly, I did want to say this before I end this, because I have given this poem some thought since I last read it, right? And one of the things that I would like to see happen, or one of the things that I would suggest if I was asked, right? Is that for etiquette classes, I think we should reimagine like what etiquette classes should be. I'm thinking this one out, so forgive me if I like stutter and stuff, but the idea just kind of came to me that I think that instead of like etiquette classes, or maybe along with etiquette classes, I think young girls would really benefit from classes that focus more on like preparing us for our future by helping us develop skills like social skills and life skills, teaching us about general and mental health, or even alternative medicine and like natural remedies and stuff like that. For example, like if you, like a simple one, if you have, I think, a sore throat, like you can do a little bit of salt and water and gargle it and then like spit it out. That's like a small thing that you could teach young people, so that when they feel ill or whatever, not ill, that's extreme, but when they feel like an itchiness in their throat, they are capable, of course, after consulting with a parent, and with the supervision of a parent, ideally, they are able to approach the problem themselves. I think, and I'm going to try to make this very quickly, or excuse me, to make this very quick, because I know this is probably really long, but I think American kids are far too like behind compared to foreign kids. And I mean, I read articles about this all the time. I hear, you know, politicians and, or I shouldn't say politicians. I don't listen to politicians, truth be told, but I hear people who report on politicians say stuff like about how the Far East Asian kids are performing very well. The Southeast Asian kids are running circles around American kids and stuff like that. And then all American kids know how to do is a TikTok dance, and it's not okay. I think that we don't have enough independence. And I think there's a reason for that. I think that we are, and maybe independence isn't the right word. Maybe what I'm trying to say is that we're just not very capable, even though we are privileged, even though like to be poor in the United States is still far more beneficial and prosperous than to be poor in a lot of other countries in the Western and Eastern hemisphere. Yet children don't know like basic life skills. And I think it's because the parents understand that if they enabled their kids, a lot of their kids would probably turn on them because of how they are being parented or how they aren't being parented. So it's like if you equip your kids with money and a job and all that kind of stuff, they're going to start to feel like they can, disrespect you or challenge you. Maybe they're not trying to disrespect you, but they feel like they can challenge you because now they have a greater understanding of how to take care of themselves. So I understand the hesitation, but at the same time, I still don't understand why, as young girls in particular, we are taught to like we're no, not even taught, we're groomed to be somebody's something. We are groomed to want to be somebody's wife, to want to be somebody's mom, to want to like be something for someone else. And oftentimes, like especially if you have foreign parents, there's all this pressure like to carry yourself a certain way or do your hair this way or dress a certain way so that you can get a man. Oh, I can't tell you how many times I heard, "Oh, you're never going to get a man. What kind of man you going to get? Oh, how you going to get a man? You don't know how to cook. You don't know how to do nothing." Like you don't know how many times us foreign girls hear that from a very young age, that we're useless, basically, even if we're smart. We could be the smartest person in the school. We could test as number 15 in the entire state. And if you are not, I guess, if able to cook and clean happily and keep yourself smiling and looking quote unquote pretty all the time, you have that insecurity instilled in you that you're worthless and that you're undesirable. So, at least for us foreign girls, I think that there's just like way too much emphasis put on being on like thinking of ourselves or our self-worth as basic. I'm trying, there's a way in which I would like to say this. I think for us foreign girls, too often times the emphasis is just put on who we are going to be for somebody else, and usually that's a man. And there's something very inappropriate about young girls even having that conversation of like what kind of man they want. Like I remember being maybe like 8 or 9 years young, and my dad was like, "Oh, what kind of man you going to bring home for me?" And I'm like, "For you? Like, sir, you're married, first of all. Second of all, ill. Third of all," I was like, I literally told him, I'm not thinking about that. I'm too young to think about that. That's how these predators are able to slide on in and successfully hunt and gather their prey, or hunt and gather us like prey, because you have these grown men and also these grown male identified women who put those bugs in our ears at a young age that like we need to be thinking about a man. We are little girls, like prepubescent little girls. We're not supposed to be thinking about a man. Honestly, we're not even supposed to be thinking about a boy, because a girl can have everything going for her. The moment a boy is involved in that picture, she throws all common sense out the window, because you're a hormonal raging, because you're a hormonal teenager. And we're groomed, and especially in American society, to have this fixation on a boy. Think of all the Disney Channel shows and the cartoons and stuff that you saw, or the books you read as kids. The main focus for the girl is usually for her to get a boyfriend or to try to get a boy's attention. They don't focus on how smart she is. They don't focus on what skills she has. Does she know how to build anything? Can she carve something successfully? Like, can she, if the world collapsed right now, God forbid, how many of us really could take care of ourselves? And how many of us have parents who taught us any of those life or survival skills? Now, how many of us were taught how to get a man? How many of us were taught, oh, wear this color and make sure you wear this type of bra when you're going to do this and that? Like, the focus is all the way wrong. And that is exactly why American kids do not compare to foreign kids. When you look at the academics, when you look at us on social media, for crying out loud. Look at, like, in the pandemic, you had American kids pop locking and dropping and doing all kinds of TikToking. And then you had the people in Asia, specifically, I believe it was in China, they weren't even allowed to use TikTok. And then when they were allowed to use their version of TikTok, they were being shown kids studying. Like, the focus is all the way wrong over here. And I think it's sad that we have so many resources at our disposal, so many libraries with free Wi-Fi and free resources and books, yet the kids are not focused on any of that. Like, it's not a badge of honor to be ignorant, especially when you have so many resources around you. Excuse me, that's all I'm gonna say though, because I don't mean to be offensive at all, but ay Dios mío, like, that's an epidemic for real. So I just wanted to say that, like, if there's one thing I would have changed about the etiquette classes, or if there's one thing I would advise, is that more of the emphasis be on teaching us the skills we need to become better versions of ourselves. Because the point of your childhood is to prepare you for your adulthood. You know, when people say, I want a baby, okay, but do you want the responsibility of taking care of a human being and preparing a human being for adulthood? Because that kid is not going to be a baby for very long. So it's cute that you want your baby, I guess, but do you want the responsibility, or is that where you're going to give up? You know, it's hard for parents when their kids become teenagers. I get it, because their teenagers start challenging them. Well, hello. If you teach your children from a young age certain things and help them understand certain things that they're going to challenge you on later, like why they can't go here and why they're not allowed to do what the other kids are able to do, like, then maybe you wouldn't be dealing with such friction between you and your kids. Like, maybe you need to have more honest conversation with your kids, and maybe equip your kids, prepare your kids for what they may be exposed to, either by other children or just by other, reckless, irresponsible adults, so that they know right from wrong and they are skilled and educated to know they don't want to go down this road. Stuff like that, can help your kids and prepare your kids for those types of situations, so that they don't have that fear of missing out and then go on to do stupid, irresponsible, damaging things just for the thrill. But I will leave that there, because, people are going to do what they want to do. People grow when they want to grow. That's what I realized. Okay, but yes, so on that note, I will say thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Things I Never Said Poetry series, and my reading of my reading of the poem Etiquette Classes. Tata, mi amores, take care. Yeah. Yeah. I put the telescope on the balcony. Told them to search the sky and find a sea. Said, baby, don't you dare get used to me. It's only a matter of time before you leave. Pulled out the stethoscope to hear me breathe. Said, baby, your heart's racing, is it towards me? He said, calm down, don't let anxiety in this wild world caving on you and me. He said, chill, girl, you gotta learn to breathe. We're doing well, babe, don't you give up on me. Said, you're a good girl, you don't have to aim to please. I know you've got a wild side, but keep your streak. Do it for me, yeah. 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 I put the telescope on the balcony. Told them let's search the sky and find a sea. Said baby, don't you dare get used to me. It's only a matter of time before you leave. Pulled out the stethoscope to hear me breathe. Said baby, your heart's racing, is it towards me? He said calm down, don't let anxiety in this wild world caving on you and me. He said chill girl, you've gotta learn to breathe. We're doing well babe, don't you give up on me. Said you're a good girl, you don't have to aim to please. I know you've got a wild side, but keep your streak. Do it for me, yeah, yeah.